Okay, welcome back. Today we have some big news. There has been a second development announcement from Canon concerning the R5, and I have brought a special guest on today. You guys probably remember my dear friend, Jaron Schneider. He is an esteemed author over at Petapixel. We also co-host that podcast together, The Art of Photography Off Camera, which has been off a lot of things lately. We need to get back on it. But today we're going to talk about Canon because Jaron actually has some inside baseball on this camera, which, like, just little he's told me before we started this sounds pretty amazing. So what are the specs here? What are we looking at?
All right, so thank you for the introduction, Ted. Hello, everyone. What we have here is it's a development announcement part 2, as Ted said, for the R5, and there are 8 bullet points that they've covered, and I'm going to go over all of them. Ted has not heard these yet, so any reactions you get out of him will be legitimate. So here we go. It opens by saying that this is an anticipated camera that's currently in development, and the newly released information divulges further details on the 8K video recording capability, IBIS, and more. So here they go. Bullet point number 1. It can record 8K RAW internal video up to 2997. They did confirm it will also do it at 24.
Whoa.
The next point is the 8K internal video recording up to that 2997 is also at 422 10-bit Canon log H.265 or 422 10-bit HDR PQ H.265. I'll pause here because HDR PQ I don't know a ton about. I talked to a friend of mine who shoots a lot of video, and he actually says he wasn't aware of any camera that shoots this yet. It's supposedly a lower dynamic, like a wider dynamic range for monitor viewing. So this might be one of the first cameras to actually shoot in even wider dynamic range than you would expect.
Interesting. Do you know offhand? I'm sorry, I'm interrupting already.
Go ahead.
So like Sony, Panasonic, there are some cameras that have the hybrid log gamma or the HLG profile, which is supposedly an HDR. Like you can play that back on, in Sony's case, a Sony monitor or a Sony television that supports it. So I imagine it's something in that ballpark, but it's Canon's version of it.
I think it's not Canon's technology. I think Canon uses it, but it's
Gotcha.
It might be similar to that. I'm not sure. Don't take my word for this.
And I'm not an HDR guy, so I wish I could tell you more. The RAW and the log are very exciting.
Yeah, so it shoots the RAW internally and the log internally at 422 10-bit.
Awesome.
But that's not all. There's more.
But wait.
Before we talk more about that 8K, let's first talk about the 4K. So, of course, it shoots 4K, but it'll also do it up to 120 frames per second.
4K?
4K.
I did not know that.
In 422 10-bit Canon log.
Ouch. That's
unbelievable. They also said on the call, I don't know if it's specifically stated here, but on the call they said that it'll do all of this while still having dual pixel autofocus.
Okay, so this is a huge upgrade so far from Canon.
Yeah, so far, and that's only the third bullet point.
All right, keep 4K them coming.
And then they also mentioned that this was internal or external, but this is kind of weird because this next line specifically states 4K external recording is available up to 5994 FPS. So I think if you're going to shoot 4K 120, it's got to be internal.
Okay.
Now, on both 4K and 8K, there's no crop at all.
Nice.
Full width of the sensor in both cases.
This is also big news for Canon.
8K, full width of the sensor in both 30 and 24p in 422 10-bit log with full-time autofocus.
That's kind of amazing.
That is the next point. Dual pixel CMOS autofocus is available in all 8K and 4K recording modes. So that does confirm that the 120p 4K will have autofocus.
Autofocus, cool.
The Canon log, as mentioned, is available both in 8K and 4K. And they say a Canon first, the EOS R5 will feature 5-axis in-body image stabilization, which works in conjunction with optical IS equipped with many of the RF and EF lenses. And finally, the dual card slots. One is a CF Express, and one is an SD UHS 2.
So dual card slots, 2 different formats.
Correct. And the
amazing.
CF Express makes sense.
Yeah, totally.
The amount of data that this is through-putting
You're pushing raw video at 8K. You're moving some big data there. That's unbelievable.
So
here's a weird question, and I don't know if you know the answer or not. 8K, I'm not sure you can push out over HDMI.
So not currently. I don't believe so. That's probably why it's all internal. They wouldn't specify what kind of out we were looking at. Would it support USB and HDMI? They didn't say.
Yeah, you almost need
You need like an
a different
SSD sitting on the camera to put that kind of thing through.
HDMI just has a cap on how much data you can move at in real time over the. And I think 4K is kind of right at that limit because I've got a 5K monitor that like not going to go. That is so. What is interesting to me and what strikes me about all this is I think Canon obviously have figured out their processor issue. I had a theory before that the reason that we had crop 4K, the reason we lost dual pixel autofocus in 4K on a lot of the DSLR descendant cameras, which includes mirrorless, the reason that is because the processor just can't handle that much information going on at one time in the camera, being able to deal with dual pixel AF, full frame 4K video, so on and so forth. So some concessions were made. Now, interestingly enough, I don't think most camera companies do. Nikon sort of does, but with new processor generations, Canon, they say, well, there's Digic 5, Digic 6, whatever, but you don't really know any information. It's not like Qualcomm where you know what's in the chip and so on and so forth. So I think clearly they have got some new technology rocking because this is like out-specking any mirrorless camera available right now, unfortunately, including our friends at Panasonic who were killing it,
Yeah. So a couple notes on this. Not only, so that theory you mentioned that they were having processor issues, I shared that theory, and a backup reason for that is the 1DX Mark II and the 1DX Mark III both have two processors in the body.
Okay.
So the 1DX Mark II, which is only as old as some of the still higher end Sony cameras, it couldn't do what it was doing without two processors, and it still couldn't do 4K with a full width of the sensor. So what we're looking at here is either a single processor, which is so much better than anything Canon has ever made before that it kills what two of its processors could do in the past, or it has two processors that are still so much better than anything they've ever made before. And on top of all of this, Ted, I've seen the EOS R5 in person. They had it at WPPI in Las Vegas a month and a half ago.
Yeah, they had the under glass model.
Before all the lockdown and all that. Under glass allowed us to get nearly 360 degree view of it.
Okay.
You could see behind the camera. It's the exact same body as the EOS
R.
Yeah.
Wow.
So not only does it have all of this capability, it's one of the smallest full frame cameras on the market. And I don't know if you've thought about this. How is this cooling itself?
That was my next question, is that they've handled heat dissipation because everything from the Fujifilm GFX 100 to the S1H, those cameras all have fans in them.
Yeah,
there's a lot of heat.
high-end camcorders that this outspecs. This outspecs almost non-full frame cameras like Reds, Aris, Sonys. Even the Venice doesn't do all of the things that this one does, as far as I know. It might do it now. They can probably do that now. But like, you're looking at the difference of a camera I'm projecting in my notes to be under $6,000. I bet it's under $5,000.
Yeah, okay, so we do not know a price at this point.
No, there's no pricing and no availability yet. Yeah, I'm speculating based on the 5 moniker. Where the 5Ds have been and where the 1Ds are. The way that they price things. Mm-hmm. It's not only going to be cheaper, likely, don't quote me on that, likely cheaper than almost everything else on the market. It's going to kill, in terms of video capability, nearly everything else on the market, no matter where you look, hybrid or otherwise.
But that Jaron guy said it would be $1,500.
I know, I said it.
Well, that was, and you and I have talked, not on public forums, but just, in conversations we have about pricing and all this stuff, so on and so forth before. One of the things that I think Canon has, or has had an issue with, and I think this puts it into a little bit better perspective, because I've always thought this too. When the 5D Mark II came out, and that was the first one to do 1080 video on a full frame camera, and that was a fluke. It just kind of went in there as a last minute feature.
There's no audio, if you recall.
Oh, no audio, and it was a hard 30p. It wasn't even 29.9. It was, but it was progressive video. You could conform it and have a little bit of slow motion look for B-roll. And a lot of us, myself included at the time, flipped out. And I think, Sony has a little bit of this issue with the A7S series because people think, wow, this did such great video. I want to see them expand on it. It's going to be interesting to see where they go. Neither one of those cameras were ever designed to do video. And as a result, there were some improvements made with Canon, but really the better video was always on higher end models. So like the C series, the 1DX Mark II, now Mark III. And there has been a lot of speculation that, oh, look at these people. They're protecting the top of the line here by giving us junk on the bottom.
Yep.
But the reality is when we look at heat dissipation, what a processor is able to do, because they clearly are not holding back on this camera at all. This is like the improvement that I think a lot of people have been wanting to see with video in a mirrorless camera, small body.
I argue this is the most, not only the biggest jump from model to model of any camera, even if you look at the 5D Mark IV or just the EOS R, which are the same camera. The jump in technology from that to this is completely unprecedented. This has never happened before.
It's amazing.
And on top of that, this is going to be, just on these specs alone, if we had no other information, the highest performing hybrid camera ever made, and it's not close.
That's wild. Well, what I was saying, though, about the price and the top of the line and all that, we were talking about heat dissipation, the processing power required to have autofocus running at the same time as raw 8K video or even log formats. It won't be the cheapest camera they've ever made. I think your guess is probably in the ballpark. If you look at the 5 moniker, if you also look at the 1DX, it is what it is. It's not a cinema camera per se, even though it has arguably cinema qualities. This doesn't mean that this technology immediately necessarily would trickle down into the lower line. You're not going to find a T7i or wherever they are now with 8K RAW.
And
it's
also,
just not going to happen.
You'd never asked for that in that camera either.
No, I'm being facetious, but it will be what it is. But what I think is very cool is to see Canon really create a specialized camera, because this is clearly designed for people who shoot video. What is the megapixel rating on this sensor? Do you remember?
I will actually pull back a little bit. The entire reason Canon did this and what they said to us coming into it was that they wanted to make it clear that this is both a super high-end video camera and a super high-end photo camera.
Okay,
so
fair enough.
They aren't actually positioning this as a video camera
to be one or the other.
It's
is both.
supposed to be truly both.
Well, so from sitting here, I'm just hearing video specs, so that was my assumption. But that's actually very interesting.
Yeah, I think I can't remember off the top of my head. I think it's in the 40s how many megapixels it's supposed to be, but it's
big.
It's going to be very good for most people's uses. And we haven't even started talking about anything in photo world yet. Like, they haven't put a lot of emphasis on that. They're really trying to show that, I guess, they're taking video seriously again, because it has been a very long time since they've done that in a hybrid camera.
So presumably we will have more updates with imaging capabilities as well as it comes. I think this is I'm pretty excited about it, and I've had, and I wouldn't say it's a love-hate. I've just been hot and cold with Canon for a long time. We've said many times on our podcast, both of us used to be Canon guys. That's what I shot, 5D series, the whole thing. And it just got to a point when Sony came along where all of a sudden they offered something that in a mirrorless format, and it was moving faster than what the technology that Canon was producing was. And so I ended up just making my move over to the mirrorless side and went that route. Now, Sony does come with frustrations and problems. Early days, it was overheating on video, so on and so forth. They've seemed to have tamed that down, but we're still stuck at 8-bit for video files, which, if you're going to do heavy color grading, is going to pretty much lock you down you just aren't going to have a lot of flexibility. It's probably the best 8K codec I've seen, an 8K log.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, I'm not doing it right now, but normally all my videos are shot on an A7 III because the autofocus is so good. But it's funny is because it's almost like Canon just said, okay, this industry's having trouble. We're going to put the stick in the ground here, put our stake down, and we are going to build the best camera and outspec everyone. Forget all you bozos, It's crazy.
One last point I want to make here about these things, the questions that we haven't had answered, is how long is this going to record in any of these formats? They didn't
what's
say.
Your recording time, right?
Yeah. So when we look at the size of the camera, we look at its how it sinks heat. It has to do it through the body. It doesn't have a fan. We look at like the Panasonic, and it needs a fan in order to do 6K. So, and not even just that, like the 4210-bit and all of its different codecs, it needs that. So this is dramatically outspecing that, and it doesn't have a fan. So what concession will we have to make to get there? Now, we're asking that question from this realm of what we currently know is possible. Is it possible that Canon developed a sensor and a processor that are not only worlds above everyone else, but also don't give off as much heat, so they don't need any of that? Yeah, it's certainly possible. I need to see it. I need to believe that when I see it. But I think and I was having a conversation with DLK over at Petapixel. He thinks a 5-minute record time in 8K is good enough, and I said that yes, 5-minute record time in 8K is good enough. I want 10 minutes. With 10 minutes, I know I can get a clean 5-minute shot and have a little bit of wiggle room. At 5 minutes, that's kind of, it can kind of push it. But like, if that's all it is, I still think, wow.
Yeah,
I am extremely excited about this. The stuff that they put in this camera is frankly unbelievable.
And the assumption would be is that 4K would be
same as it always is. Yeah, 30 minutes or more.
30 minutes or more. And now that I believe the EU tax has been lifted on video class cameras now. So
because we've already started to see that there is no recording limit on new cameras. They don't say anything
Sony's
about it.
Taken it off of all people. Yeah, which is amazing, because I remember, especially when you look at. And maybe it is possible, because I think maybe a parallel could be drawn. The RX100 series, the little pocket camera that Sony makes, which when the RX100 4 came out, I was flipping out, because it was like, here's a 4K camera that fits in your pocket. This is amazing. And you use a gimbal with it. It's a really small setup. I use that for a lot of vlogging through the years, especially if I'm out on the street or something like that. It's just a really compact setup. The big issue with that is it had a 5-minute recording limit up until this last one, the 7. And then they lifted it. Didn't say a word about it. When I did my review on that, they'd actually loaned me a camera to use. And I thought, well, let's just see how long it takes to overheat. And I think you and I were texting that day, and I'm like, I'm making lunch. I was sending
and it's still going.
Still going.
The battery died before it overheated.
Yeah, it did. And to be able to make that leap from a 5-minute limit to indefinite in 4K is pretty outstanding. And it's possible. I mean, there are many things that go into that. I think from Sony's case, and I don't know this for fact, but my guess, because I do know that they've rewritten their firmware a bunch of times, and efficiency in the coding side can work wonders too, when you're able to offload your workload on a processor, or maybe there's a new processor. I don't know, but heat is definitely an issue. I mean, we're not even talking 4K unlimited though. We're talking 8K raw. What is a minute of raw video? I remember recording raw video years ago, because I had an external recorder that would do it from Blackmagic. And I thought, oh, this is the way to do green screen. And it's like a minute, and it filled up a 250 gigabyte hard drive.
Yeah, I mean, it's wild. I mean, the amount of money people are going to have to spend on CF Express is going to get it's going to get outrageous. Like, I remember when I bought for CFast, I still have a wallet of CFast cards, and it's over $5,000 or $6,000 in cards that I'll never use again.
Cheap.
Yeah, now CF Express is a lot more future proof. So if I was to invest again, I'd feel a lot better about it. But I hopefully people are ready for what this is going to cost. It's not just the camera; it's everything else.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what your workflow is going to be, and people who are watching this video, I know that some of them are really interested in the video side of things. Some of them aren't at all, and you probably haven't watched this far if that's the case. But if you have, and you're really excited about video, I mean, it's going to be an investment. What are you going to do to archive that footage? Where are you going to store it? I mean, you're going to build up a library of stuff. It also is going to depend on what your use is for it. And I did the video with Jordan Drake recently, and one of the things we talked about in that call, we were talking about, I think it's probably in part 2, which I haven't released yet, but we were talking about the 6K functionality in the S1H Panasonic that you're using right now, actually. And we were talking about, the context, because I said, are you actually using 6K to punch on videos you're doing with DP Review? And he said, no. He said it would be a real rare instance where I'm doing that. He said, but if I'm doing a film or I'm doing a personal project and I want that flexibility, it is there. So it's an option. You don't have to shoot in 8K. It depends on what your delivery format's going to be at the end, why you need 8K, if there is punching you want to do. It doesn't necessarily mean this camera's going to cost you a fortune. It just depends on what your workflow is and what you want to do with it.
Yeah, and a question that you have to ask yourself with the S1H, if you do choose to shoot in the 6K format, is it worth the extra resolution to lose bit depth? Because you can't shoot at 422. It's 4208. 4208 or 10, one of those, but it's not quite as nice as their 4K footage.
So you give up the resolution.
But you don't have to ask that question with the Canon.
No,
because it's the same across the board. It's wild. It is wild that you can decide, well, I guess now I need a little bit more space. I'll do 8K and not have to do any other humming and hawing about what are you giving up.
True.
And something I want to point out is anyone who was talking down about this camera was doing so out of a history with Canon, where Canon always seemed to have some little thing that was like, you can have all this, but it's going to cost you this. So I don't blame them for saying there's no way we're going to get 8K without like a major crop or some silly frame rates we'll never use.
Low data rate or whatever that is.
Yeah, and I think Canon as a business knows that's how people react, which is why they're doing these like trickling out announcements about this, is to essentially wait for the audience, like people, to say things so that they can go back and say, well, actually, and show you what it can actually do. I think they're honestly having fun. When I'm talking to the people at Canon in the last 3 or 4 months, they have not actually been as excited as this is more excited than they've ever been. They are smiling. They are stoked. They know what they've got, and they're excited to talk as much about it as possible. And when they have to hold their tongues, you can see them like smiling, like can't say that. Gotta wait. It's not ready yet.
But something's exciting.
Yeah,
that
they're pumped. You can see their heart rate going up when they get excited about it. Some guys who I know who work there that haven't been really excited about a product in years are like cheeky smiling. Like they know that this thing is fantastic.
They've got a winner.
Yeah, and it's not out of like they have to feel this way because they work for the company. I think they're well aware of the market. They waited this whole year plus with the RF mount. They've got an entire lens library already just waiting for this camera.
Well, and that was one thing I was going to mention because I've seen that excitement with the lens division. They are clearly excited when they do anything public where they're talking about why they're doing. And you could just tell in the products that they put out, like, lenses that are unique. The 28 to 70 f2, you're not going to find that on any other system.
And now you're going to be able to shoot with that lens in a video format that surpasses almost every other camera on the market, from Red to ARRI to Sony.
Yeah.
This only thing this is missing is like SDIs and audio controls, and they didn't tell us if it has waveform, but like I would be shocked if it didn't have waveform. They're probably going to do like a hot shoe adapter like Panasonic does so that you can have access to SDIs and audio controls.
We'll know eventually, yeah. But
they do all that.
What's fascinating though is like just hearing you say that, going back to the pricing guesses that we're doing because we don't know. But like you look at the 28 to 70 millimeter f2 lens, it's not super cheap. It's a $3,000 lens. It's somewhere around there.
It's probably more than that.
Yeah. So in the context of the R and the RP, that lens looks really expensive, but when you're getting into specs that are out-speccing some actual video cameras, this is where it gets interesting because if you've ever priced cinema lenses, $3,000 would be a cheap lens, and you'd probably wonder if it was any good at all if it has cinema stamped on it. And that wouldn't have autofocus, and that would not have, wouldn't be an f2, for instance. Cinema lenses typically don't have the same kind of sharpness when the way they render. I mean, there's a lot that goes into it, but this could be the sleeper system.
By the time this comes out, no one's going to be sleeping on it. Like
this will be amazing.
I think some folks will be absolutely chomping at the bit to get one of these, especially if they're shooting video.
Money now.
I don't know about photo. We'll see photo when that comes out, but Canon has been known for making pretty good photos. I mean, the dynamic range of their old cameras is
they sort of have a reputation for that.
Yeah, it used to have a great reputation for photo, and I think they'll get it again. I honestly, I have not been this excited for a non Panasonic camera in a really long time. So I'm personally quite stoked.
No, I think it's cool. In fact, I think it's just so amazing because definitely this is a finer slice of the audience pie in terms of people who buy cameras. But what's Panasonic have done is really impressive, and I think with all the S cameras last year, culminating with the S1H, like they really put their best foot forward. And I thought, other than their autofocus issue, they're killing everything, right? And then here comes Canon,
and there's there is no autofocus issue. It's one of the best on the market. I would say second best on the market. Yeah,
I think that and Sony, it's kind of a toss up on what you're doing with it, but they're both really, really good. Personally, I think Sony has an edge, but it's just because it works with what I do. But I never had a problem with dual pixel. I always thought it was very consistent and
super easy to use.
And you do have that on lower end models. It was on the 80D, the 70D, Yep. So certain parts of this technology you will find. I don't know. I think this sounds really awesome. If you guys have any questions, drop a comment below. We can get back and answer you. And have you started putting your money away yet?
Squirreling it away, yeah.
Like nuts, waiting for Canon. Well, it's interesting because there is no date on this yet, but I would presume it would be, it probably would depend on the current situation some, but I would say within the year.
I think that's the expectation. We'll see the reality of it. I'm personally expecting fall now. Initially, I was expecting summer.
Yeah, I
now
would say
now
before
in
the
fall.
end of the year, but I think it would be silly to start announcing things like further out than that. But
Yeah.
who knows?
We'll see.
They know what they're doing. So, all right, we'll catch you guys in the next video. Until then, later.